What's up, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm back with another SDYK format video because I managed to rope someone into playing some games of anti-mill versus mill. So, as I mentioned in the format guide update that I released a couple of days ago, mill is, in my opinion, undisputably the best deck of the format. And pretty much every deck in the format can't really deal with mill unless you bring something like this monstrosity to the table. Now, what this is this deck has 51 cards in it to hopefully not get milled out by mill. It has a bunch of anti-stall tools in the main deck, like Stop Defense, Remove Trap, Dispel, all that stuff. It has the Tribute Aggro sort of package with the Summon Skulls and the Change of Hearts. It has a ton of 4-star beaters that it can just constantly get out to put offensive pressure on the opponent. It's just a very, very, very targeted deck meant to win against one type of deck and one type only, and that's mill. So before getting to the games, let's just dive in to the deck breakdown here. For the monsters, we have 3 Login, 3 Neo, 3 Battleox, which are the premier beaters of the format, and we also have 3 Great White because it has 1600 attack, which is the next highest attack on a beater. But realistically, this could be a Ryu Kitchen powered, Manning Treasure Chest Rogue Doll, whichever 1600 beater you prefer, because this deck isn't winning against any other deck besides Mill. We also have 3 Maneater Bug. Now, this card's a bit slow, but it can be removal. And oftentimes, decks can struggle to deal with the defenders that the mill deck can just bring out. So having one more removal option is useful in a lot of cases. And also, you'll likely be depleting a lot of your opponent's removal on all your other monsters. So Maneater Bug is more likely to stick around in this deck than it is in other decks. We also have 3 Summon Skull to pair with 3 Change of Heart. Summon Skull can both be sort of a removal spell when combined with Change of Heart, and also can get over your opponent's 2k defenders without needing like a reinforcement or something. So it's a pretty good card to have in this deck. For the spells, we have 3 Change of Heart. Now, these are great as a removal spell with Summon Skull, just to tribute off your opponent's monsters. But they can also be used to take your opponent's monsters to make a big offensive push with. It's just a pretty good card all around. We have our classic removal in the form of Raigeki, Dark Hole, and also Fissure, because we're overstuffing our deck with cards, so Fissure can be used as a removal spell, because there's room for it in the deck. And it can be very good at dealing with your opponent's defense position monsters. Speaking of dealing with your opponent's defense position monsters, we also have 3 Stop Defense, just to switch those 2k defenders to attack, so we can attack over them. We have 3 Monster Reborn to bring back things like our Summon Skull to get over our opponent's defenders. We have 3 Pot of Greed. Now, Pot of Greed can be risky in this deck, because while it's unlikely this deck loses to Mill, it still can. So you have to be a little bit careful with Pot of Greed. But generally, Pot of Greed can be good if you still have more cards in your deck than your opponent and you're playing around their card instructions a bit. It can be useful to have. And then we have the major anti-stall tools in the form of Dispel and Remove Trap. Dispel is to get rid of Swords Revealing Light, which can really put a hamper on the deck. And Remove Trap is to get rid of Ultimate Offering, which can be just a very powerful card for your opponent in just stalling you out. So both these cards are pretty good inclusions to the main deck if you're just targeting this against Mill. And then for the trap cards, we have 3 Reinforcements and 3 Trap Hole. These cards are just sort of removal. Trap Hole isn't really going to come up at all because your opponent isn't really summoning cards, but it can be good in the rare aggro matchups that you get. And also it can be good because occasionally you'll just run into the case where like you're not drawing any monsters and your opponent can actually try and deal damage to you with things like Aqua Matadors or Wall of Illusions. And so this can really put a hamper on that if they do try and do that strategy. So It doesn't come up much, but it's deck filler and it can be removal, so it's not bad. Moving on to the side deck, we have 3 Mystical Elf, 3 Card Destruction, 3 Swords, 3 Ultimate Offering, and 3 Woboku. This is just for a smokescreen side into mill, because the deck has 51 cards, so it can play mill pretty easily. And if your mill opponent sides into their smokescreen aggro side deck, then a mill deck can potentially just make that deck really suffer, especially if card destruction is used to discard their Wicked Worm Beasts. So this smokescreen side can be very, very good if the mill player also tries to smokescreen side. But that's the basics of the deck. If you want a breakdown of the mill decks, then you can check out either of the previous 2 videos that I released, or you can check out the update to the guide for more details on why the mill deck is so good. But now that the deck breakdown's out of the way, let's just jump into the game. Okay, we got a game against Chiaki, who is on the anti-mill deck, and me, who's on the mill deck. I chose to play the mill deck because, first of all, it's a very tough deck to play, and I've been sort of grinding it in solo mode for a bit, but also because I really felt like I wanted to test out the full power of the anti-mill strategy, and the way that I felt I could best do that was by playing the mill strategy and seeing if there was any way I could cope against the anti-mill deck. But we've got a game on our hands, so we are going first here. And we've got a decent start. We've got Ultimate Offering, which is very good to have. And we have a Defender and a Woboku. So this is actually a very good start for us. So we'll just set the Ultimate Offering, the Woboku, pass back to them. They've got a Neo, which they'll try to get in with, but we'll just Ultimate Offering here. Set a monster. They'll pass back to us. We drew a second Card Destruction, which we don't really want to see this early in the game. But we're doing pretty good in terms of the cards that we have. So we'll just Swords in case they can remove our Defender, and set one of the Card Destructions in case they decide to Card Destruction us as well, because we don't want to lose 2 Card Destructions. They'll just pass back to us. We drew a Mystical Elf. I'm not sure why we set it here. I think we could have waited for Ultimate Offering. I mean, maybe we were worried about... Yeah, I really don't know why we set the Mystical Elf. Oh, that's why. So, I guess we didn't really like our hand that much, and we wanted to go for some card destructions while our opponent had 6 cards to sort of just lower them down to a lower deck count than we are. So I guess that makes sense. So we're setting the Mystical Elf to get it out of our hand, so we draw 1 less card, and it does die to just Dark Hole or Raigeki, but that's not the worst thing in the world for us. So we are going to Card Destruction them for 6, and then we'll Card Destruction again, clearing those Card Destructions out of our back row, and also just getting through a lot of their cards. And we can see that they actually used up 2 D-spells, so that means our Swords is very likely to stick around. And they also used up a Remove Trap as well, which is very good to see. We'll just pass back to them. They're going to set some cards and summon out of Battle Axe, pass back to us. Clearly worried about a 3rd Card Destruction in their future, so now they're playing around it a bit. We drew another Swords, which is nice to see, especially because they likely don't have a D-spell, unless they drew the 3rd. We're just going to pass back because we've got a pretty good board. We've got a Wall of Illusion in hand. They do have Raigeki, and they will bring out a Summon Skull, hard tributing it, which is a bit rough for us because the Summon Skull can get over our wall. So we don't necessarily want to bring out the wall, so we are just going to Woboku here. And we did draw an out to the Summon Skull, just a very roundabout way, by activating Double Fissure to clear their whole board. And we'll just pass back to them. They're going to Reborn the Summon Skull, which is a bit rough for us, and then bring out a Lodge in. And we can't afford to take this much damage, so we are just going to bring out a Wall of Illusion. They'll attack with the Lodgin and get over it with the reinforcements just to keep their Summon Skull on field, and they will manage to get in for 2,500, which is pretty rough. They'll set another pass back to us. We are going to Swords here, just hoping to draw an out to that Summon Skull. And clearly they don't have a D-spell, so we're feeling pretty good about that. Set a Waboku. They'll bring out another monster. We drew another card destruction, so we could fire the card destruction here, but there's no real need to. They don't have too many cards in hand, and we're okay with the way that things are right now. I'll bring out a Neo, so we're really hoping for some form of board removal, but we've used up a Dark Hole Array, so we should be able to draw some Dark Hole, some Raigeki, but we're just not getting lucky with it. So we'll set a Trap Hole, pass back to them. They're just going to go in and try to get in for lethal. We will Waboku as opposed to Aqua Mataroring here. Just hoping to draw some board removal. And we just don't have it. So we will card destruction here. It's a bit rough because it puts us on even deck sizes. But it's also not the worst because we're still ahead. And we do draw into board removal. So that's pretty good. They're going to Pot of Greed here, because they are behind on cards already. So they're just digging for something that can deal with what we've got. And they're going to D-spell, because we've used up 2 swords already. So they'd prefer just to get rid of this Trap Hole. If it was a bluff that we set before card destructioning, then it's a good move there. But it's a Trap Hole. So they know we have Trap Hole now, so they can play around it a bit. And they will Reborn with Summon Skull, which is pretty rough for us. We are going to take 25 here, so we don't have too many more activations of Ultimate Offering. And we have a choice to make here. We can just leave the Summon Skull out and then just Ultimate Offering an Aqua Matador potentially. But that opens us up to, if they have reinforcements, they can get over the Aqua Matador using another monster. And they've only used up 1 reinforcements, so it's very likely they have another in the back row. So we don't want that to happen, so we are just going to Raigeki their Summon Skull. And they're just going to pass, which is pretty good. We can feel free to Pot of Greed here because they're behind on card. We can feel free to Pot of Greed here because they've still got a lower deck count than us, so we don't have to worry about decking ourselves out before them. We're just going to set another Trap Hole, pass back to them. They're going to bring out Lodgin, we're just going to Trap Hole it. You know, why not? Pot of Greed again, you know, we're still going to deck out after them in terms of just deck sizes. So we can feel free to activate this pot. And we'll just pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Neo. We are just going to Trap Hole that. Maybe that was a bit preemptive and we should have saved it. Just used up an Ultimate Offering to, you know, bring out a Defender. But I figure it's clear that they don't have many monsters left. So we might as well just Trap Hole the Neo preemptively. We just drew another Defender. We'll pass back to them. They're going to Pot of Greed yet again. And I think this is actually a bit risky because Remove Trap does exist. But so I think I probably should have set a Defender. But I think what I'm worried about here is that they have Change of Heart, because they've only used up 1 Change of Heart so far. So it's very likely they have another. And so I don't want them to take a Defender from me. So they will bring out a Lodgin, and we will pay 5 to bring out a Mystical Elf. They're not even going to attack it. They're just going to set 1 and pass. We'll just pass back to them as well. And they're going to stop defense our Mystical Elf. Now, this could actually be a game here. If they have a reinforcements, they can just attack into the Mystical Elf. We've only used up 2 Waboku, sure. We have another Waboku set that they don't know about. But it would force us to use the Waboku preemptively if they attacked the Lodgin into the Mystical Elf. So that actually is, you know, potentially lethal on board if they have reinforcements. But they are just going to Fisher the Elf and attack in with the Lodgin. So we will pay 5 and set a Defender there. And they're just not going to attack it again. We can feel free to Pot of Greed again because they're going to deck out first. And we did draw a Fisher, so we'll use the Fisher to clear the Lodgin. But unfortunately, they do have Change of Heart, and they are able to attack in. We will pay 5, our last 5 that we can pay, to bring out Wall of Illusion. They'll pass back to us. We'll just switch the Aquamador to defense, and if they have a board clear, there's nothing we can do about it. So we'll just set a Spirit of the Harp and pray. They do have stop defense, which is very rough, and they are going to Change of Heart. Now, if they do have reinforcements, this is lethal, so I think I probably should have Wuboku'd here, but I don't, and it does come back to bite me because they do have reinforcements in the damage step when we can't activate Wuboku, and that will be the end of the game. So I hope that the first round of this match sort of shows off how powerful anti-mill can be against the mill deck in game 1. Sure, the mill deck did manage to get the anti-mill deck lower on cards, but the anti-mill deck just had so many anti-stall tools and just had so many offensive beaters that it was able to overwhelm the mill deck, even though the mill deck was able to mill them a bunch. So, anti-mill deck game 1, pretty much guaranteed to win. I hope this duel showed that off well. But let's get into games 2 and 3. In the sideboarding here, it didn't show you what we sided in, but we just did the classic mill standard side into, Wicked Worm aggro. So that's what we did. I'm not actually sure how Chiaki sided. I think they probably sided into mill, but I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, we're going first again, and we've got a decent hand. No Ultimate Offering or Wicked Worm Beast, but we do have 2 Lodge-ins, which are very good beaters. So we'll just set 3 pass. They're going to bring out a Great White and attack in. We could have trap hold that Great White, but we figure Lodge-in can get over it. So we'll just try and attack in and hope they don't have reinforcements. We'll bring out Lodge-in, attack into the Great White, and they indeed do not have reinforcements. So we're feeling pretty good about that. We'll set a reinforcements of our own and pass back to them. They will Pot of Greed here, which is very funny that they set that because, we could still be on the mill strategy. So they're trying to play around that as much as possible. So, but only in a mill match would you get a player setting Pot of Greed. Very funny. They'll set a monster, pass back to us. We have Wicked Worm Beast finally, which is very nice. We attack in with Wicked Worm Beast, figuring that they're probably not on defenders. And it is a man-eater, so they will pop our Lodge-in. But having the Wicked Worm Beast attack in kind of gave them a bit of a choice, because Wicked Worm Beast is better for us long-term than a Lodge-in is, because Wicked Worm Beast can dodge removal a lot better. So it was a bit of a tough choice for them, whether they would take the damage or kill the Wicked Worm Beast. So we forced them to make that choice, and they did choose damage over Worm. They'll set 1 and summon out a Battle Axe. We'll just trap hole that. We've got 2 trap holes, so we might as well use it. We'll bring out another Lodge-in and attack in just to get board presence, and we'll pass back to them. They're going to Change of Heart our Lodge-in and then tribute it off for a Summon Skull, but we do have a second trap hole, so we can get around that. We drew another Wicked Worm Beast, which, you don't really want to draw 2, but I guess if they can trap hole the first one, then this is pretty good. We'll attack in for 1400 and pass back to them. And they're just going to set 1, bring out a Battle Axe. We don't have a trap hole this time, so we will just let that connect. And they'll pass back to us. We'll bring out Wicked Worm Beast and then just Change of Heart their Battle Axe. Try to get in for a ton of damage here. And that will indeed connect. And we will activate swords here, so that way they can't keep getting in for damage. They're going to Pot of Greed because they know we're not on mill, and they're ahead anyways. And they do have the D-spell for the swords, which is kind of rough. They're going to bring out a Great White, and then attack in. So it looks like they didn't side in. Well, they might have sided into the mill strategy. It's tough to say, because side decking in the anti-mill deck is kind of flexible if you're doing the smokescreen side. There's a lot of cards you can cut from the deck, so they might have sided into mill and just kept the beaters as well. But we'll see. Pot of Greed, draw 2. We are just going to dark hole their monsters away. summon out Wicked Worm Beast, and that does get Trap Hold, unfortunately. So we'll just pass back to them. They Pot of Greed again, hoping for a monster or something that can protect them here. But unfortunately for them, we just can keep up the offensive pressure. Summon out Wall of Illusion, it gets Trap Hold. I think that's a very good play, because if we have reinforcements, which we do, then that Wall of Illusion does represent lethal. So they do have to Trap Hold that here, which is just according to plan. It's why we summoned out the Wall of Illusion instead of the Wicked Worm Beast, because the Wall of Illusion would represent lethal anyways, and we don't want to lose our Wicked Worm Beast. So they finally have a monster, so they're going to bring out the Battle Ox and attack in. But that's not too bad for us. We've got a Battle of Ox of our own that we can bring out here. And we also have Raigeki to clear away that last Battle Ox. And they take it. No Waboku in sight. Yeah, it looks like they might not have sided into the mill smokescreen side. And this kind of shows why siding into the mill strategy for games 2 and potentially 3 is generally good for the anti-mill deck to do, because the worm control deck that the mill deck can side into is just much better than sort of the diluted aggro that the anti-mill deck has. So we do win that one there, and we are going to be going to a game 3. For the siding, again, we just keep on the smoke screen into the aggro, because we figure that even if they side into mill themselves, they will win the mill battle, because 51 cards, it's just a bit too much for us to get through, and they'll have 3-card destructions of their own, so they can manipulate how many cards are in our deck. So we just keep the worm aggro deck, or the worm control deck, I guess, in rotation, and it looks like I think they are going to side in to the mill strategy here. But we'll find out for sure in this game. So we have a great opener, by the way. That Ultimate Offering in hand, very nice to see. We have Wicked Worm Beast and Lodgin as well, Trap Hole Waboku. This hand is just killer. They're going to Pot of Greed, draw 2, Pot of Greed again, draw 2 more, and they'll just set 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and pass. Playing around card destruction a bit, and also just having an incredibly formidable back row. So we're just going to try and trigger something here. We're going to bring out a Battle Ox and just attack into the set. We kind of predicted it was a man-eater bug, but we summoned out Battle Ox because we don't really mind too much if we lose that one, as opposed to like Lodgin or Wicked Worm Beast. So we are just going to set 3, pass. They're going to bring out a Lodgin, and we're just going to Trap Hole that right away. Pass back to us. We're going to bring out a Lodgin of our own, try and trigger maybe a Trap Hole or something. And they don't have it, so we're just going to get really aggressive here and just Ultimate Offering to bring out a Wicked Worm Beast. And just attack in for a ton of damage. We'll set a Reinforcements, pass back to them. They're going to just Change of Heart or Lodgin and tribute it off for a Summoned Skull, which is pretty rough for us. So we will take the 2500 here. We could have Waboku'd, figuring that it's likely that 2500 is probably more damage than we're likely to take on other turns. But I feel comfortable saving the Waboku for next turn, because we don't really have a way to get over that Summoned Skull this turn. So if we still don't next turn and they bring out another monster, then we'd rather use the Waboku on that turn instead. So they're going to pass back to us. Luckily, we do draw an out to the Summoned Skull, so we'll just activate that Dark Hole real quickly, bring out Wicked Worm Beast, and attack in. Deal 1400 to them, and pass back. So they reveal that they did side into the card destructions here, which it's not necessarily the best thing to use card destruction when we only have 1 card in hand. But that 1 card to the Wicked Worm Beast, which we'll be able to bring out every turn, and they won't really be able to deal with effectively. So I think it does make sense that they're card destructioning here. We draw into an Ultimate Offering here, which is kind of rough for us. We don't really want this necessarily, especially when they can Monster Reborn back their Summoned Skull and bring out a Battle Ox. It did a lot of damage, so we are going to Waboku that. and they have a swords to top it all off. So we're in a pretty bad spot. This ultimate offering in our hand is not what we want to see. But luckily we drew Pot of Greed. So we are just going to Pot of Greed and activated Swords of our own. Pass back to them. They'll pass back to us. Sword of Revealing Light is such a fun card. We'll set the Dark Hole because we don't necessarily want to activate it now in case they commit to more monsters. So we'll save it, and we also don't want it to get card destruction out of our hand. So we'll just set it face down, pass back to them. Swords is such a fun card. I think I've said that before, but I'll say it again. Swords is so fun. They're going to pass back to us, and now both of our swords are gone. So we are just going to start off with a Pot of Greed. Not that it'll make a difference. We're just going to Dark Hole this away anyways. Bring in a Lodgin. They'll Trap Hole the Lodgin, which is rough. And we will just pay 500 to bring out another Lodgin to get that offensive pressure going. And we'll attack in. They are not choosing to use Woboku here if they have it, which is pretty good. We are one attack away from game. And they will Change of Heart here to tribute off for a Summoned Skull, which is rough because we don't have any more defenders in hand. But we do have Change of Heart. So if they truly do not have Woboku, this is the end of the game. And it turns out they don't. So we do manage to actually scrape out a win against the anti-mill deck playing mill. I think part of that was because game 2, the anti-mill deck didn't side into mill. And you really want to do that in games 2 and 3 because it just can really mess up the smokescreen side into worm control. But I think part of it was because just like playing 51 cards is not consistent. It's kind of necessary in this anti-mill deck to deal with the mill deck game 1, but it also prevents you from drawing powerful cards that you might need, like Woboku, for instance. Most other decks would have a Woboku in rotation by now, just by nature of being slim enough to draw into that Woboku. But the anti-mill deck, because 51 cards, wasn't able to do that. And that ended up costing them the game. And there's nothing you can really do about that. No way to change how you play to draw into that Woboku, because it's all luck at that point. So I think that shows off one of the big weaknesses of the anti-mill deck, and shows that even though it's targeted to take down mill, it can still lose matches against it. However, I also was able to get another game against Chiaki here playing the anti-mill deck, and that game went a bit differently. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so we got another match against Chiaki here. They're on anti-mill, we're on mill. You know how it is. We're just going to get this game started. And they will be going first here. So they're just going to get started with a Pot of Greed, which may be a little greedy, but honestly, if they play around card destruction like they're clearly doing here, it's not greedy at all. They're going to bring out a Lodgin and just pass to us. We're just going to Dark Hole the Lodgin. We've got removal in our hand. And we're just going to set 2. They'll pass back to us with no monsters. We do draw card destruction here. We're not going to use it yet. We want to save this for when they have a ton of cards in hand. And we're feeling pretty good about what we got so far. It's just the passing game, you know. We don't really want to do anything. They don't really want to do anything. And we're just going to keep passing. Now this Pot of Greed is interesting. We could activate it here, but we're lower on cards in our deck than they are. So we don't necessarily want to do that. So we are just going to keep passing. And they have 5 cards in hand, which is pretty big. So we could actually prep for a card destruction of our own. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to set a defender and set another card, pass back to them. We don't want to be too obvious that we are setting up for a card destruction. But let's see if we can catch them unawares. They are going to Change of Heart, which does let them then use up one of their back row, so they can set another if they want to. And they can also bring out a Summoned Skull, which we will Trap Hole, but they were able to get 2 cards out of their hand with that play. So that was a bit rough for us. And we did take 800. And I think they played that well because they played around sort of a trap hole or Wuboku. They just got in for damage. They figured we had trap hole. So they were like, we'll bring out the summon skull, but more as removal at the end of the turn. So it passes back to us. We draw another trap hole. And now it's not really as profitable for us to do a card destruction. So we'll just pass back to them. They're just going to set one and pass. We figure that that is very likely to be Man-Eater Bug, because what else would this deck set? And it is Man-Eater Bug, so that paid off for us. They're going to dispel the swords, and they're going to reborn the Summon Skull, which is pretty rough for us. That's 2,500 damage. We are just going to Wuboku this, because we do have removal here. We do have Sword of Feeling Light to stall them a bit longer, so we figure we can afford to. We drew another Pot of Greed, which is really, really tough. This hand is not what this deck wants to see against the anti-mill deck. So this is a rough turn for us. We're just going to set a Spirit of the Harp, set of Swords, pass back to them. They are just going to Dark Hole away our Spirit of the Harp, bring out a Neo. We're going to Trap Hole that, you know, it's a monster that they have got, so we just want to clear it out of the way. And we draw a Raigeki, which is pretty good. But we don't have any interaction with them on their turn, so we are just going to Swords, set the Raigeki, pass back to them, and they're just going to set a card pass. We drew another piece of removal, which is very good. They're going to bring out a Great White, pass back to us. We finally drew a monster, so we are going to Dark Hole, set a monster, pass back to them. This is in case they have a D-spell. So they're going to reborn back a Summon Skull, and then just pass back to us. Another Pot of Greed. This is really not what this deck wants to see against the anti-mill deck. This makes it incredibly hard to set up for card destructions that are profitable here. And I guess it does give us a way to draw deeper into our deck to potentially get pieces that can protect us, but this is just a very, very rough draw. We are just going to Raigeki the Summon Skull and then set one of our Pot of Greeds as a bluff. They're going to Dark Hole our Mador, bring out the Summon Skull again, and we don't have anything to do about this. There's going to be a lot of damage here. You could actually argue that we should have Pot of Greed just preemptively to hopefully draw into something that could protect us against this sort of play. But I guess I got a bit greedy myself. We're going to draw, and that's an Ultimate Offering. So we are going to draw two, and those are not the draws we wanted to see. We have to use up another Pot of Greed here just to draw into something that can help, but this is not looking good. They've got 10 cards more in their deck than we do. You know, we've got the 3-card destructions to make a big push at the end of the game, but you know, we're in a rough spot here. They're going to attack him with the Battle Axe. We will bring out a Man-Eater Bug, figuring that they can likely get over our defender. So we are just going to Man-Eater Bug, pop their Summon Skull, and they'll pass back to us. Raigeki is good to see because we can use it on whatever they bring out, but they reveal they have Remove Trap, which is incredibly rough for us. We are forced to Trap Hole the Lodge in, and they'll get in for 1,700. This is just a rough game right now. We are going to Raigeki the Battle Axe, Pot of Greed, just hoping to draw into something else, and we do draw into an Ultimate Offering, which can give us a bit more insulation, but it's looking rough here. They're going to Change of Heart our Mystical Elf. This would be exact lethal if they attacked in, so we are going to set Wall. We're just going to pass. You know, we could set the Aquamador, but that just plays into board wipes. So we're just in a really rough spot. They're going to Raigeki. They're going to summon out Man-Eater Bug, which does play around Trap Hole if we have it, even though we don't. But we have to take that damage, and that's the end of the game here. And you can see we really had no chance this game. We had no good time to activate this card Destruction to get our opponent down to lower cards in deck than we had. We drew Pot of Greeds, which we really didn't want to draw in this situation. And they just were able to dismantle all our stalling tactics. So Anti-Mill won this one very, very confidently, very, very easily. And that just shows the power of the Anti-Mill deck game one. But let's see how it does game 2 when we side into our worm control deck. So we sided into our worm control deck. I'm pretty sure from the sideboarding process that Chiaki sided into mill, but let's find out, shall we? Okay, this is a pretty great hand. We've got Ultimate Offering, some Offensive Pressure, Wicked Worm Beast. This is just looking really good. We'll just set the Ultimate Offering, pass back to them. They're just going to set 2, summon out Lodge in, and we'll Ultimate Offering here. You know, summon out a Lodge in of our own. If they want to attack in, they can. And that Woboku, they set this turn, so they can't actually activate it here. So this will actually cause our Lodge-ins to both be destroyed by attacking in there. And, oh, that card destruction is brutal here. They're able to rip 4 cards out of our hand. And 4 very good offensive cards here. We lost a lot of offensive pressure in that card destruction. That's just really unfortunate. They are going to Pot of Greed here just to draw a bit more and pass back to us. We're just going to set 3 and pass. We're trying to play around card destruction now, but we don't have any offensive pressure here. They are going to card destruction. Honestly, that's not bad for us. Sure, we're 2 cards deeper, but we could draw into offensive pressure. We do not, though. We just draw a Change of Heart and Swords. So they're going to attack in for 17, and we will take that. They're going to Dispel, hoping to hit a bluff, and we do have a bluff in the form of Raigeki. But they don't hit a bluff, they just hit Reinforcements. So we'll pass back to us. We're just going to Change of Heart the Battle Ox, attack in, get some offensive pressure going, and then just Swords. Pass back to them. They'll pass back to us. We have Maneater Bug. You know, we're just passing back and forth here. We drew a Lodge-in, which is very, very good here. We'll attack into the Battle Ox, and they're just going to Woboku. Keep that Lodge-in on the board. Oh, they're going to Woboku and Reinforcements. Okay, yeah. So I get what they're doing here. They know that we have a Reinforcements from the Dispel that they activated before. So they activate Woboku before the damage step to protect their Battle Ox, and then they will activate Reinforcements in the damage step to get us to use up our Reinforcements. So that's a pretty clever play. Pretty heads up, I think. They're going to draw 2 with Pot of Greed. Change of Heart our Lodge-in to bring out a Summoned Skull. Even though they can't attack this turn, they protect their Battle Ox for another turn. And now our swords are gone. Luckily, we do have Raigeki here, so we can just clear their entire board. We'll set 2 and pass. They'll bring out Neo, and we will Trap Hole the Neo, and they will Reborn the Summoned Skull. So we'll pay 500, bring out Maneater Bug, and they'll just attack into it. If it's a defender, they get very lucky there, but it's not. It's a Maneater. So we will get to clear their Summoned Skull. We drew another Swords, which is not what we want to see. We want to see some offensive pressure here, and we just keep on not drawing it. We'll set another card, but they've got a Swords of their own, and that's really rough for us. We'll just activate his Swords and pass to them. We're setting the wall because we don't want it to get ripped out of our hand with card destruction. So we have a Battle Ox, and we will keep that in hand. We drew the Wicked Worm Beast as well, which is pretty good. It can give us some offensive pressure. They're going to Dark Hole the wall and bring out a Lodge-in, which we will Trap Hole. But they will card destruction here, which is incredibly rough because we lose that Wicked Worm Beast. So they've sniped 2 Wicked Worm Beasts with card destruction now. And also a bunch of Battle Oxes. Like, we've got 3 Battle Oxes in the grave, 2 Lodge-ins. We don't have much more offensive pressure in our deck. So that's incredibly rough for us. And we're just, you know, we're low on cards already. We just got to draw into offensive pressure as soon as possible. And we're just not getting it. So we'll set 2 and pass. And it's really not looking good for us. They'll bring out Great White. We have to Trap Hole that because we don't really have a monster to deal with it. And we just draw another Ultimate Offering. Pass back to them. You know, it's not looking good. We do draw a Lodge-in, but that will get Trap Hold. So nothing we can do about that. And they're just going to Pot of Greed. They might as well. They're so far ahead of us on cards that they don't need to worry about drawing deeper into their deck. We're just going to keep passing back. We don't really want to use our removal until we draw an actual offensive pressure here. So we will Pot of Greed, draw into Man-Eater Bug, and then we will actually set the Man-Eater Bug. It is what it is. It's rough, but they'll set a Man-Eater Bug of their own, and we will be able to flip up that Man-Eater Bug, get in for at least a little bit of damage here. And it's just not looking good, though. They're going to bring out Battle Ox, and we will Woboku because we do have the means to clear the Battle Ox on our turn. And we have the means to Change of Heart it, too. So we can just attack in for 2150. We've got 7 cards in deck. We figure we can fire these Wobokus and then just clear the Battle Ox on their turn. We got to get in some offensive pressure, though. We've got Wall of Illusion, which, this will get in some offensive pressure, potentially. 1450. They're down to 2250. We're making an effort. We have 1 Wicked Wormbeast in deck, so if we can draw that, we can feel pretty good. But they are going to Raigeki our board, which is pretty rough, and then they are going to Monster Reborn and attack in. We don't really have anything to do about that. So they have swords, and they can just stall us for 3 turns. And even if we do manage to bring out a Wicked Wormbeast, we need to attack in successfully for 2 turns. So if they have a Woboku or like anything to deal with that, we just lose here. So I Dark Hole anyways, but it's looking very bleak. They're going to bring out a Neo, attack in, and we're just going to Woboku that. It doesn't really matter at this point. Pot of Greed, so it's just tough. Like, at this point, there's nothing I can really do. I could wait for the swords to expire, but it's not going to matter. It's just very, very tough. They've just backed us into a corner, and there's nothing we can do about it. They're going to attack in for 16. We do draw Wall of Illusion, which is not bad. This could maybe get us in for enough to protect us if, they can't clear the wall, but they can clear the wall. So, and we just draw reinforcements. We've got to draw Pot of Greed here, hoping for some sort of big offensive push we can make at the end of the game. But unfortunately, we don't have it. And, you could have argued that we should wait for the Pot of Greed just because we could set our reinforcements first, potentially get in with Wicked Wormbeast for 2400, which would kill them. But we'd have no way to deal with the Great White, and that Great White would just kill us. So there was nothing we could really do here, and we will lose to deck out. And they do have the Trap Hole for the Wicked Wormbeast anyways, so it wouldn't matter. But that is the game, Nothing we can really do about that. We are just going to show that we've got some Ultimate Offerings, and we will just lose to deck out. So, yeah, there was nothing we could really do that game. And I think that this duel really does show off the power of the anti-mill deck because, the mill deck can get a bit lucky and win a match occasionally, but the anti-mill deck can just counter it at every turn if it sides into mill, So it's just an incredibly good deck. Or I guess not incredibly good, but it's an incredibly niche deck that can win some games. However, you might have realized a bit of a caveat to the anti-mill deck's dominance, and that's that, if the anti-mill deck was just a regular mill deck with 51 cards, it would also just beat the mill deck that we have here. So, really, the anti-mill deck is actually sort of the inferior anti-mill quote-unquote strategy, because the real anti-mill strategy is just to add more cards to your mill deck and just make it a huge deck that can out-mill the other mill decks. And, games 2 and 3, the mill decks can't really side against it because, they're still going to lose to mill. And games 2 and 3, you're basically playing that game plan with the anti-mill deck where you're like, okay, I got them game 1 with an actual aggro strategy. Now let's side into a mill strategy. But if you were playing a mill strategy from the start, then you'd already have that in the tank. So honestly, the best anti-mill deck is just another mill deck. The only thing is that the more cards you add to a mill deck, the more likely it is that you will just get draws that don't help you, and your opponent will be able to get in for enough damage to kill you before you can mill them out. So it's a bit of a trade-off there in consistency, just like the anti-mill deck has a bit of a trade-off in consistency. But I honestly think the best anti-mill deck is probably just a regular mill deck with more cards than normal. So that's a bit of a caveat on this sort of anti-mill aggro deck, but I wanted to show it off because it is a unique deck to this format, and it is a deck that can win games. You know, it may not be as good as just a mill deck with even more cards, but it is unique, and also a lot of people don't necessarily like playing mill as just an anti-mill strategy, right? They'd rather do this kind of crazy, like, just aggro build and use that instead. So this deck is for them. This deck is for the people who want a way to combat mill in the format, but who don't want to stoop so low as to playing a mill deck all 3 games of the match. So this one's for them. However, I really don't think it's as good as just mill itself. I do also want to note that I think that sort of the best anti-mill strategy, quote unquote, would sort of rise to the forefront if this format was tested more. As is, it's largely just me theory crafting for it. Me and some of my friends, although once mill was revealed to be the dominant deck of the format, a lot of them stopped because mill is just so degenerate. And I think that if this format was tested more, you know, the mill deck would be refined to the point where they'd be able to figure out the ideal amount of cards to run in the deck. Like, maybe 42 isn't the best. Maybe you should actually run more in cases of just going up against decks with more cards. And there is a trade-off there in terms of consistency, but potentially that trade-off can be sort of offset by the fact that, you know, you'll be playing other decks with more cards in them. So it's hard to say, you know, when the arms race of the mill decks just adding more cards to their deck would really find its upper limit. But, you know, if more people get into the format, maybe after watching these videos, and manage to figure that sort of thing out, then I would be happy to make more videos in this format, as I do think it's pretty interesting to see what the format's like with just 3 of very powerful cards in everyone's deck. But as is, this is going to be my last sort of video showcasing these duels in SDYK format. I do plan on having at least one more SDYK format video because I gotta do my tier ranking for the decks in the format, just like I did with LOB format last time. But as is planned right now, we will soon be leaving SDYK format and going into Yugi Kaiba format, which is actually somewhat playable, or so I've heard, and actually has a thriving community around it. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm looking to diving into that and just getting to know the people in that community. And I'm really looking forward to some more fun games, because the games in this format, or at least against Mill, are definitely not that. So that's going to be it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any feedback, as always, leave some comments down below. But until next time, I've been Ben with YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.